Hey everybody, my name's Jared. Today we're going to be doing some more painting just for fun. I'm going to be showing you how I painted Jubilee from the Marvel United X-Men Blue Team box. Let's get to it. Before we can paint, got to get a base coat. So stick my mini onto my very high-tech mini priming device, and I load up some black primer into my airbrush. And you just go pretty wild with this. Just gonna get a nice even coat. Try not to beat it up too much. Very important is to get very frustrated at fungus gnats buzzing around your face. Critical point. Sometimes you have to realize that they just want a fancy new coat of paint. Try and help them out, keeps flying away. But I do get them. Nice and pretty. Just oh so gingerly pick him up and send him on his way. Then we can get back to priming this miniature. So once the black is on, I go in with some white, and this is just hitting it from the direction I want the light coming from. This is called a Zenithal highlight. Now I don't use this like most people do, because I don't have high contrast paints, but I just like seeing where the shadows are, where the highlights are. It can help a little bit, but mostly it's a visual thing for me. So now that we've got our mini fully primed and ready to go, stick it onto our little painting handle with some blue tack and start loading up our wet palette with the paints we want to use. So I use all Folk Art brand acrylic. This is apple red, cobalt hue, some medium yellow, and titanium white. They're not the greatest paints, they're not the worst paints. I like them, I know how to use them. So here we're trying to get the shirt color. So mixing a little bit of that apple red and that medium yellow. I'm going to thin it out quite a bit and just give a nice even coat all over her red shirt. And with some of that Zenithal highlight, the shadows still showing through, adding a little bit of that cobalt into here. And now I'm just going to hit the shadows, really bring those out. Push them back, I should say. And because that first coat was so thin, you will have to go back over it once or twice depending on the color. So here I am just getting a nice, even, consistent coat for the base of the red. And for the highlight, I'm just adding a little bit of that medium yellow and a touch of titanium white. I'm just going to hit the high points. Adding a little bit of Calypso Sky to my wet palette and mixing in some of that cobalt. And I'm going to thin this down and cover her shorts and boots. Both very similar blues, which made this part pretty easy. And for the shadows, I'm adding a little bit of the apple red and a little bit more of the cobalt. And just getting those dark recesses on her shorts, the backside underneath her jacket, and the back of the boots. And just with the shirt, got to go back over and get a cleaner coverage because that first layer was so thin, so this is just the base blue once more. And then for the highlights, mixing a little bit of that titanium white into our base mix of blue. And I want to get that blue jean look. So I'm just doing thin little horizontal lines instead of hitting solid highlight points. Pretty happy with how that effect turned out. And I'm going to attach this little hook. Helps me stabilize my hand, which I got pretty shaky hands. Just using some of that medium yellow getting the X-Men decal on the corner of her shirt. Not trying to be careful here, just want to get it in the recesses of it. And I can also use this and get her belt buckle. Adding some pure black to the wet palette, getting the belt, and then the outer part of that little X-Men decal. Here I'm just using the edge of the paintbrush. It's a very fine detail, so it doesn't require too much paint to get it. And now we're moving on to the skin tone. So I'm using some French vanilla, roasted pecan. I'm mixing just a little bit of that medium yellow with those two colors. This ends up being a little too bright, so I add a bit of that apple red to add some warmth to it. And if I'm not sure about it, I'll hold up the card and try and see if the color matches perfectly. And I'm pretty happy with it. So once again, I thinned it down quite a bit, and I'm just doing a first pass on all the exposed skin. I'm not too worried about covering up some of the details on the face. We'll be able to go back in and clean that up later. Now to get a darker shade of the skin tone, I'm adding a little bit more of that cobalt, some apple red, mixing that together. It's a little too dark. I want the shadow to be a little bit more subtle than that. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So now starting on the side, furthest away from the direction of the light that I chose when I was doing the Zenithal highlight. Getting the side of her face, underneath her chin, on her neck, the backs of her arms. And I like to frame the lit side of her face as well. It helps break up that single tone of paint. Once I'm happy with the overall finish of the base color, we can start blending in, cleaning up some of the edges around where the shadows are. And here I'm blending the light and the shaded mixture, and I'm really blending in those two colors. I want this to be a nice, smooth transition from the shadow to the light, because it's a nice rounded features on the face. And then mixing in just a little bit of that titanium white, I'm adding a bit of the highlights, hitting the high points of her face and her legs. I don't remember where I learned this, but like I said, I got shaky hands. So getting fine details on the blacks, the little rim around the eyes, which really makes the eyes look good, I can't do that with a fine brush. So if I start with that base of black and then come in and add the whites of the eyes on top of that, it makes it so much easier. Now mixing to get her iris, a little bit of that roasted pecan. Want to get it a little bit cooler and darker, mixing the cobalt and apple red together, and just a little dot of that. And then add the pupil, tiny little black dot. Here I'm breaking out my smallest paintbrush I have. And then you add the tiny little shines. This usually does not take me a single pass. I am not great at this. I often have to scrub off my mistakes and start again. But I'm pretty happy with how these eyes turned out. And we can't forget about the other features of the face, the eyebrows and the lips. So here I'm mixing a little bit of that apple red with some titanium white because I don't have a pink. I don't know why I don't have a pink. Now we get to move on to the fun part. All of the yellow. This painting her jacket was aggravating. Yellow is not an easy color. I hate it. I hate it so much. But after you get that base coat on, again, just a very thin down yellow to work on top of. Here I'm adding a little bit of the cobalt to that yellow, the medium yellow, and getting the underside of the jacket and some of the dark recesses. I fiddled with this longer than I liked. I could not get the shadows to work right. But I kept working at it. And when I was sick of doing the shadows, I moved on, started brightening up the yellows a little bit. I can't tell you how many coats it took to get a finish that I was happy with. Yellow and white, I don't know what it is about those paints, but they are frustrating. They look great, but boy, they're frustrating to get to look good. Here to get the shadows, I pushed the shadows a little darker than I wanted. Added a little too much of that cobalt into there. I couldn't figure out what I wasn't liking. So I just stopped messing with it, moved on, brightening up some of that medium yellow with some titanium white, and just hitting some of the high points, giving those nice little shines, hoping that will save it. It doesn't. I'm never happy with it. I do go back at the very, very end. I let it sit for a couple days, and it bothered me. But I do go back and fix that. Moving on to the clean side of my wet palette, get some of this very, very gloopy, pure black, mix in with some cobalt. I'm working to get the base of the hair color. I didn't want the blue to be super perceivable, but I just wanted it to be not pure black here. And I thinned it out, do a once over all of the hair. Beauty of using darker pigments. They tend to go on a lot smoother than stuff like yellow and white. So I enjoyed this part. Now for the front-facing part of the hair, mixing in just a tiny bit of that titanium white. And this will hit, this isn't the highlights, but this is the lit, forward-facing tufts of hair. Now I've added a little bit more titanium white to that. And this is, you just get that little shine. Now moving on to her glasses. I thought I grabbed the apple red, but I grabbed the Christmas red. I'm trying to mix that with some titanium white and a little bit of that Calypso sky. I'm not able to get the pink. It does not work the way I wanted. That Christmas red is a little muddier, a little bit more brown than the apple red. And I realized that, add some apple red, and I'm able to save it. Mix a little bit of that with some more titanium white, And I'm able to get a good pink that I'm happy with. And the glasses aren't really solid pink. They've got a little bit of cool hue to them. And that's why I mixed in some of that Calypso Sky. But pretty happy with it. And adding just a little bit more of that cobalt, trying to get the sides of the glasses where it's not as sharp and bright of a pink. And on this side, there will be more light, so I didn't want to push it too dark. But on the other side, that's further away from the light source, quote unquote light source, I added a little bit more of the cobalt and a little bit of apple red to push that a little darker, but not too terribly dark. I don't want it to be black. And I almost forgot about her earrings. It's just more similar colors of pink and yellow. Now working on the highlights on the sunglasses. Mixing just a little bit of that titanium white into that mix of pink that we've been working with. And then for these diagonal shines, this is just pure titanium white here. And I'm referencing the card art for where I'm putting these. Now my wet palette got a little messy, so scrapping that piece of paper, getting a new one, mixing some titanium white and pure black, moving on to the base. Just want to get a nice gray, because I don't have gray either. Why buy gray when you can mix it? So I've thinned this out quite a bit. I'm just slapping it all on. Just about everything on the base is gray. The little canister she's standing on, all the little bits of metal and stone. I do darken it up a little bit for the backside of these items, still continuing with that directional light source. But I'm not being too cautious of where I'm putting paint, just kind of getting it down. I tend to go a little bit more realistic on the base, go faster, use dry brushes, as opposed to following the more comic book style for the character itself. And all these paints are pretty wet, so I'm able to blend them pretty well together as I'm going, get nice gradients. So now I'm using one of my few Citadel paints. This is Runefang Steel. I hate these pots. They are such a pain to use. But I'm thinning this down a whole lot. I just want the sense of metal. I don't want the actual color of the paint. I did darken it for the backside because it still is a little too bright for this. I'm using some of that pure black to hit those weird wires that are in so many of these miniatures. And the little canister looked a little flat, so I'm using some watered down black. I'm just going over some of the sharp edges, making them pop a little bit more. Now you're using some Valder Gold, and I'm just adding a little bit more visual interest. I'm hitting some random spots on this little canister that helps kind of break up this single color. There's not really a reference for what this is, so I'm just using my imagination. Now mixing some apple red and that medium yellow, I'm going to add a touch of that Valder Gold into there, water it down quite a bit, and kind of like a dry brush, I'm going to get most of the paint off And you'll see I'm just gonna stipple this onto the miniature. I want this to kind of mimic the look of rust. Again, it's adding a little bit more visual interest to the base. Not really doing it with any rhyme or reason, just putting it where I feel like it should go. Adding some final highlights to the high points, the edges of this canister, little rivet dots on the metal steel panels. And then that little faceplate was calling to me. So I'm just squiggling some nonsense on there. Give it the sense of something. A little bit, like I said, visual detail. And then adding just a dot of that Valder gold for the exposed parts of those wires. I think it looks cool. For the rim, first I go over with a couple coats of the titanium white. This will help the next color go on a lot easier. I'm not trying to get a super smooth finish, just consistent enough so when I go back in with the cobalt, I don't need as many layers, as many coats of it to get a nice, bright, consistent blue. Now I'm adding 3 equal distance stripes of the Calypso sky. It's kind of like my signature on all these miniatures, this little shine on the base. So I'll just take that Calypso sky and cobalt and start blending them from dark to light, going from the cobalt, mixing in a little bit more of that Calypso. As I get closer to the center, now I'm mixing the Calypso with titanium white. And finally ending with a single thin line of pure titanium white to give this nice little shine. And here, that finally broke. I couldn't stand, like I said, how dark I pushed the shadows on the jacket. So I go back and I just kind of slop all over it with a slightly brighter, muddy yellow green. I messed with it still for quite a while, but ultimately I just wanted to pull the shadow back up a little bit. I'd pushed it down a little too dark, and ultimately I'm pretty happy with this second pass. But with that, she's done. For those who made it to the end of the video, thank you. This is my first full video. I've done quite a few of these shorts painting the Marvel United miniatures over the last year, but this is my first full-length one. Not a slideshow. That one doesn't count. But hope you guys enjoyed listening to my voice more than I enjoyed listening to it while I was editing this. I'm sure I'll get used to that the more I do this, which I plan to do more of it. And eventually, I will actually get back to my namesake and start doing some sculpting. But with that, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Okay, bye!